What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Friday, July 12th edition of the Ship My Money Show Tournament Edition. I'm your host, Adam Scherer. You can follow me on Twitter at ShipMyMoney DFS. We have a 12-game slate tonight, a lot of teams to choose from, a lot of teams that look pretty similar, so it should be a pretty interesting tournament slate. This show, I can already tell, is going to be kind of interesting just because the lineups that I would be getting to if the slate started right now are not lineups that I really like the way that they're spaced out, distributed, however you want to put it. So we'll be talking a little bit about why I think that is and how I probably do fix it between now and lock. But a lot of games on the slate, a lot of teams with similar implied run totals. No real weather concerns last I looked that I think we're going to need to worry about. It looks like Baltimore and the Mets game both have some rain issues, but as of right now, likely that at worst you're just getting a late start. We will want to keep an eye on those. Obviously, it's weather. If that rain timing moves, it could change some things. But as of now, it seems like we don't have to worry about too much weather-wise, which is nice. As always, like the video, subscribe to the channel. Been doing more live shows. Somebody's mentioned it in chat. Did a best ball stream earlier with Davis Maddock. Going to be doing more shows going forward, so make sure you're subscribed to the channel to get notifications when those shows go live. Also, if you haven't already signed up to check out Endgame Syndicate, the link is in the description below. That's the new site that I've launched with Utica, Brick75, and Nerdy Tenor. All of us putting out instructional videos, training videos, trying to help you get better at DFS, in addition to doing monthly roundtable Q&As for our subscribers, being active in Discord, all of that stuff. Our goal is to make you less reliant on all of the publicly available tools and help you improve your game on your own. Also, if you are somebody like me that is, no matter what, going to be at least somewhat reliant on publicly available tools, a lot of talk about how to utilize those as well as you can. So I've already learned a lot of stuff just from working with those guys. It's the kind of site that I wish had existed a long time ago because it would have saved me a lot of headaches trying to learn things on my own when I could have just asked other people that have already done it. So check that out if you haven't already. And now getting into this one, again, not going to go game by game. Already did that earlier. Going to go more position by position today, kind of just bouncing around, looking at where I would supposedly be getting to if the slate started right now. As I said, I don't think this is actually all that reflective, at least in some spots, of where I would be, just because normally I don't get ownership as concentrated as I have right now, especially on a 12-game slate. But we'll talk through that, and I'll talk about why those things might have happened. As always, if you have questions, throw them in chat. Happy to get to those, whether they're DFS specific or slate specific, but mostly the slate specific ones, just because I am going to be bouncing around a bit. So there are pretty much undoubtedly going to be questions about some player or some team that I personally don't have that may or may not still be a perfectly fine play for you. So going to start with the pitching here, and I would expect to be somewhat spread out based on how much I'm getting to a couple specific offenses. And that is the case a little bit. 50% Sean Manaea, 38% to Freddie Peralta and Cole Reagans, 28% to Ryan, 22% to Crochet, a little bit going to Gray, Hunter Brown, Garrett Cole. Sean Manaea here kind of stands out as far as like he doesn't belong in the price range that he's in from a talent standpoint. He's 8,600. For context, Cole Reagans is 8,500. Cole Reagans is a hell of a lot better than Sean Manaea at pitching. But Sean Manaea is in a pitcher-friendly park in New York, and he's got one of the most pitcher-friendly matchups you can get, facing the Rockies outside of Coors Field. So while the price tag does kind of look funny when you look at the names around Sean Manaea, it is warranted because of this matchup with Colorado. So he does look like a good play. He's very reasonably priced. Freddie Peralta, I don't really love the matchup here. I had talked about him on the show this morning that I didn't really love the matchup. I am still getting to him. Obviously, the matchup is factored in there, but it's not a very good strikeout matchup against Washington. They aren't a great offense, but they have the third lowest strikeout percentage against right-handed pitching this season. Don't love that for Peralta, but overall, he is obviously a very good pitcher. He has the third highest strikeout percentage on the slate behind Garrett Crochet and Sonny Gray. And his salary, while $9,700 in a matchup that isn't great for strikeouts, isn't ideal. It's not that important on this slate because there are some good value offenses. Miami is really, really cheap in Cincinnati. Cincinnati is really, really cheap in Cincinnati. And then there's just other inexpensive offenses as well. And even if you're going to a more expensive offense as a whole, there are plenty of cheap teams that you can mini stack or grab one-offs from that still have upside. So I don't think the hitter pricing just isn't very tight on this slate. And that makes the $9,700 salary on Peralta easier to get to than it would be on some other slates. Cole Reagans, I really like here. It's a dangerous park and a dangerous matchup going against the Red Sox in Fenway, but he's way too talented for an $8,500 salary. About a 30% K percentage this year, 3.2 xFIP, 7.5 K prop. Still looks really, really good. And whatever concerns you have about Fenway or about the Red Sox are, I think, mostly mitigated by the $8,500 salary. So, I think those would be things that you talk about a little bit more if he were the same price as Peralta, for example. But at $8,500, he looks good. Joe Ryan, $9,800, very good park in San Francisco. Very good strikeout pitcher, striking out about 27% of hitters this year. He doesn't walk anybody either, which helps his efficiency. So happy to get there. And again, the $9,800 price tag isn't that much of a concern because there are so many cheap offenses you can get to. Garrett Crochet, the best pitcher on the slate from a talent standpoint, striking out nearly 35% of hitters this year, gets a pretty good matchup against the Pirates. There is some minor concern kind of just hanging over Garrett Crochet from a DFS standpoint that the White Sox might just, pull the rug out from under him at some point and say, oh yeah, by the way, he's now pitching 3 innings at a time because he has never thrown many innings in a season and we want to save his arm / not have him get hurt before we trade him for a bunch of prospects at the deadline. There is some percentage of risk there. I certainly don't think it's the most likely outcome. They mentioned it a couple of starts ago that they were going to start limiting his innings. They haven't done that. Don't look into the 4 innings he threw last start. He still threw 93 pitches there. He just didn't pitch very well, wasn't efficient. They pulled him after 93 pitches. That was, I think, the deciding factor, not the 4 innings. So there is some small percent chance that you just get screwed on Garrett Crochet today. But that aside, it's a very good matchup. He is a little bit more expensive than these other guys. As I mentioned, hitter pricing isn't that tight today. It's not going to be that tough to get to him in most lineups. He looks really good. Sonny Gray, I think, is kind of a step behind all those guys, mostly because he's at a weird price point. He's $100 less than Garrett Crochet, who's just better. But Sonny Gray does have the second best strikeout percentage on the slate. He has an okay matchup against the Cubs without Cody Bellinger, so he looks perfectly fine as well. He is getting about half the ownership of Crochet also, which is nice. Hunter Brown, 8,200, getting about half the ownership of Reagans in that price range, and less ownership than Minaya in that price range as well. Talented pitcher, not a great strikeout matchup against Texas, though, so that's why he doesn't project quite as well and why he's getting less ownership. But this is pretty much fully what I expected when I did my show this morning. I'm just mixing and matching this group of pitchers that all look pretty good. There's nothing like super interesting to say about any of them. The only really interesting points I have are that the matchup for Peralta does scare me from a strikeout standpoint, but he is still a really good pitcher, so that only goes so far. It's not like the matchup isn't factored into his projections. So this is, I think, pretty clearly the group of pitchers that most people would agree are in the best spots tonight, and that is perfectly fine with me. So nothing really surprising there amongst the pitchers. If I look at guys that are getting ownership that I'm not getting to, like I'm under the field on Crochet and Brown and Gray, but I'm still getting some, and in Crochet's case, getting a pretty good amount. Then it's just a bunch of low-owned pitchers that I don't have any of. So there's nothing really ownership-wise that stands out as particularly interesting to me when I'm looking at the pitching that I'm getting to. The hitting is where I immediately looked at this and wished that I had more time before the show to just start over and make sure I hadn't messed up anywhere. But I'm getting to a ton of this Cincinnati-Miami game, and on the surface, I don't have a problem with that. I love this game. It's a great hitter's park. You don't have cores on the slate, so it's the best hitter's park, really. A lot of these games are in pitcher-friendly parks, too, especially a lot of the offenses that I think you would like to get to are either in tough matchups or pitcher-friendly parks. So all of that does drive up this Miami-Cincinnati game. The amount that I'm getting to makes me think that ownership projections right now are just too low on them. At the beginning of this show, I had gone back and was looking at the field that I used when I was, deciding what lineups to play. And you can see here that ownership on this whole game is projected right now between like 5 and 10%. It's a 12-game slate, so it's not like I think you're going to be getting 25% ownership or anything like that. But I do think these numbers are low, especially given that with those numbers, this is the result that I'm getting. And I have a similar process to a lot of other players as far as utilizing sims and all of that stuff. If sims and the process that people are using are telling them that this Miami Cincinnati game is this drastically underowned, it just means that the ownership is going to come in low. So between now and lock, I am going to end up adjusting this ownership to come up because I just think that across the board it's too low. So that's why you're seeing these massive ownership numbers here. But this is still a spot that I certainly want to get to. You have two of the weaker pitchers on the slate in Yanni Chirinos for Miami and Carson Spears for Cincinnati. Neither guy misses a lot of bats. This park plays up power. It's a huge ballpark bump for Miami. They still don't have a great implied run total here, but when you think about what Miami's normal implied run totals are, given that they play half of their games in a pitcher-friendly park and that they're not very good, it's higher than normal. Their prices haven't adjusted. Jazz Chisholm at 4,200 is a joke of a price in Cincinnati. He's very obviously one of the best values on the board. Brian De La Cruz has some power. Sanchez has some power. Josh Bell is a good value at 3,600. Xavier Edwards is batting second at 2,300 in Cincinnati. This is kind of like the Cincinnati game on yesterday's early slate, where in that case, Cincinnati had the highest implied run total on the board and was also like one of the cheapest teams. Here, Miami doesn't have the highest implied run total, but across the board, they're going to be some of your best projected value plays. If they're not going to be projected for ownership, you would just be getting to a ton of them. So, like I said, I expect to either see ownership projections across the industry come up on these guys, or I'm just going to bump them because I'm pretty confident that if people playing, 150 lineups in tournaments tonight are using ownership projections that say this Miami team is 5 to 10% owned, they're going to just be jamming Miami. So I do think you probably get a lot of these marks closer to like 15, 16%. Jazz Chisholm might hit 20%. So I'll be bumping those if nobody else does it for me. That aside, I do think they'll probably be one of my highest owned teams because even if they were projected around 15% ownership, I'd probably still be getting to them in that like 15 to 20% range, if not a little bit more. So I do expect to get to a lot of Miami. I think this is probably an accurate portrayal in terms of direction to where I'm going offensively, but I don't think I'm actually playing 66% Jazz Chisholm or 38% Brian De La Cruz. The rest of the exposures here are a little bit flatter. I've talked before about 30% generally kind of being where guys get cut off. And if I were to play significantly more than that, it is generally going to be on a very, very obvious mispriced guy like Jazz Chisholm. But on a 12-game slate, that still doesn't usually happen. And then the other thing is that if I'm playing 50 lineups, I really don't typically need 32 of them to be some version of a Miami stack. I do like that only 9 of them are 5-mans. So I am getting a nice mix of, stack some other team and then use Miami value. That is a more preferable approach to me than just playing like 32 Miami 5-mans, because at that point you start really overlapping with yourself really heavily. Whereas if you're using them as mini stacks, you're putting yourself in a position where obviously you are still reliant on them to do well, but you're less reliant because you can still cash lineups with, 2 bad scores from a 2-man as opposed to a bad 5-man. So Miami's really interesting to me. Again, I do think these ownership numbers come in higher, but I also do think I get to a lot of Miami today. And then on the other side of that game, Cincinnati looks good as well. Ellie De La Cruz back in the lineup. He is 6,400. He's only projected for 7% ownership. He really might not be that popular today. I think he's a really good play just because I'm not really having trouble finding the salary for him, in part because I'm getting to so much Miami. But he's facing a pitcher in Chirinos that doesn't get a lot of strikeouts. Only a 14% K percentage against lefties so far this year, 13% going back to last year with a 213 expected ISO allowed. That is really, really appealing for somebody like Ellie De La Cruz. So I really like him, especially with him not projected for much ownership. Rhys Hines is not projected for a ton of ownership. He's cheap, gives you some power and some stolen base upside against Chirinos. Don't love getting, tons of an 8-hole hitter, but he does have upside more so than most 8-hole hitters, and he is in a hitter-friendly park. Then you can see just getting, 15 to 20% of more of these Cincinnati guys, Stevenson, Candelario, India, Marte. Pretty fair pricing across the board. I really, really like this game offensively. My only concern here is that I don't think I'm actually like in the minority as far as understanding this is a good offensive spot, especially when you factor in the salaries. So again, I will be bumping ownership in a lot of these spots manually. It will probably pull down my exposures, but I do still expect to heavily be getting to this game. I think it looks like the best game on the slate, all things considered. Um, Beyond those teams, getting to Seattle again against Tyler Anderson, Cal Raleigh showing up 20% of the time, obviously had a huge game yesterday. Has nothing to do with why I like him today, but Tyler Anderson is another pitcher that just doesn't miss a lot of bats. Striking out 16.5% of right-handed hitters this year with a 172 expected ISO allowed. Lefties have a 203 expected ISO. I assume you'll be getting a predominantly right-handed lineup, but and that does kind of play to Anderson's strengths. His best pitch is his changeup, but the problem is if he's working behind in counts, he doesn't have the ability to get hitters out with really anything but that changeup. So he's really got a small margin for error. He's very reliant on command. And when things go poorly, they can go poorly really quickly. And then you're getting this big park bump for Seattle. The Angels didn't use a lot of their bullpen yesterday. That's kind of the only like negative here for Seattle. Usually when a team scores 11 runs, you can kind of go back to them the next day because there's a high chance that the opposing team had to burn through their bullpen. But the Angels just took it on the chin, had somebody go out there and give up like 8 runs after they took their starter out and finish out the final like 6 innings or whatever it was of that game. Mitch Garver should be in the lineup today. He's cheap. Todd just mentioned Garver home run in chat. I like that call. Nothing wrong with that. I am trying to scroll back and catch up on questions as I talk, which isn't the easiest thing. But yeah, did I do well yesterday, Adam? No. Seattle was my highest owned stack. Cal Raleigh was my highest owned player. I lost like 50%. So no. Yeah, I am worried about Peralta. Just I don't like the matchup, but again, he is a good pitcher overall. Anderson versus Seattle coming off of a monster 10K game. I loved him tonight. I don't. Just not that type of pitcher. Seattle does strike out a lot, but Boston's been bad versus lefties, question mark. Their active roster since the start of last season has a 101 WRC plus. You'll predominantly get right-handed lineups in there to start this game. Braves look sensational. I'm not really getting to them right now, but I don't have a problem with them. The matchup against Vasquez is certainly very good. That park, again, has been good for power so far this year. Yeah, I'm not getting a lot. I think maybe they're a team that hopefully I get a little bit more of if I do lose some of that Miami. But yeah, it is a very good matchup for them. Across the industry, which teams would you say are the chalk? It's projected to be pretty flat right now. Like, I mean, this is sorting by ownership on hitters. It kind of just has to change, I think, by lock, or it's going to be wrong. Because all it's going to have, if every hitter is just going to be projected by the industry to be like 5 to 10% owned, regardless of who they are, then you're just going to get, for a lot of players, what's happening with Cincinnati and Miami for me, where the best values or the best raw projections are just going to get driven up because there's no ownership preventing you from wanting to get to them. If you tell me that this guy that projects really, really well is going to be the same ownership as this guy who's a clear step behind him, I'm going to just keep playing the guy that's better if they're going to be projected as equal. So I don't know if things will change or not for the industry by lock, but these are not the ownership projections I'll be going with. I will be adjusting based on basically just saying that the players that showed up a lot for me are probably going to be more popular than are being projected right now. So I do expect that the Cincinnati-Miami game is probably the most popular game. It's the best value. It's a great hitting spot. I don't think there's anything sneaky about it. Like, I don't think I uncovered anything special by saying that 2 mediocre pitchers facing off in Cincinnati is a good spot to roster a bunch of really cheap hitters. So I expect that to be the most popular game. But I do, so, and in general, I do think that ownership will be pretty flat overall because, like I said at the top of the show, a lot of the hitting spots tonight are very similar. There's not really any one perfect spot. You know, Cincinnati is probably the closest that you get, but it's not perfect because the hitters themselves, for the most part, suck. So it's not actually perfect. Kansas City, you know, in Boston is a pretty good spot, but like some of them are expensive. Cooper Criswell isn't terrible. You're getting kind of a quasi bullpen game. That's not all ideal. So you have a lot of like very similar implied run totals. So I think that ownership will be pretty flat overall because it's a 12-game slate. and like you don't have cores or anything, I just think the value from Cincinnati is going to get pushed up more than is being projected right now. So I think that'll be the most popular game. Just going down a little bit more. Houston against Heaney. Yeah, high upside spot. I like Houston a lot actually as mini stacks. I'm curious to see if I'm getting that right now. Not really. Yeah, not getting them as mini stacks, not getting to them really at all. Again, that kind of stuff is going to be a little bit misleading just because I'm getting to so much of the Miami game. But I like the idea of Houston as mini stacks at the very least, because even when Andrew Heaney's at his best, and he has been pitching better lately, even when he's at his best, he's a fly ball pitcher that struggles with home runs. And Houston's got a bunch of very affordably priced guys that can hit home runs to take advantage of the Crawford boxes in left field in Houston. Bregman at 4,300 in particular, Pena at 4,100, Diaz at 4,400. I would really like the idea of, even if you're not 5-man stacking Houston, which you certainly can, but even if you're not doing that, getting some 5-man stack and then mixing in Bregman Altuve or Bregman Diaz, with the idea that even if Heaney continues to pitch well, there's a pretty good chance that you can pick up a couple home runs, and those guys are as likely as anybody to be the ones that hit them. Can you go through some of your non-Miami lineups? Yeah, I can. The problem is I don't have very many of them. I only saved 50 here, and 32 of them are Miami. 19 of them are Cincy. So I don't have very many non-Miami lineups, but I will look through some of them. Getting to some Seattle, Toronto, KC. I can look at the 5-man stacks. Toronto, I guess I should pull that up. Toronto 5-man. So this is another team that I like as far as upside goes. The park isn't ideal in Arizona, but I do like the upside that you're getting because they are very fairly priced. They do have a pretty good matchup against Ryan Nelson. Now, against Nelson, you do prefer left-handed bats, and the Blue Jays are predominantly right-handed, but they do have a lot of right-handed power, and they are also pretty inexpensive. I made this point on the show this morning, but you can see it looking at these lineups as well. When you just think about what a good Toronto game looks like and the amount of power and talent that they have in their lineup, and then you can know that you can combine that because of their prices with good one-offs, good mini stacks, and good pitching, it's really easy to see how the raw ceiling for that lineup is really high. So like you look at a lineup like this, Vidal Brujan is not particularly exciting at second base, but you're getting the Jazz Chisholm, who's probably the best hitting play on the slate. De La Cruz is cheap and has power in that park. You're getting to a good part of the Toronto order with Guerrero, Bichette, if he's in, Varsho, if he's in, Jansen, Turner. And then you're getting two of the highest upside pitchers in Crochet and Peralta. And you could, in theory, drop Peralta to Reagans and then, upgrade Brujan to a real second baseman or something. So, it's a very, very high upside spot. This next lineup, Cole Reagans and Joe Ryan. Nick Gonzalez batting cleanup against Crochet. Obviously, I hate that play individually. It does negatively correlate with Crochet. I'd rather just have a different second baseman. But Corey Seager, obviously really high ceiling. Jazz Chisholm, again, just probably the best play on the slate. So, another really high upside team there where you're getting to two of the best pitchers. You're getting the Seager, you're getting the Jazz. Minaya plus Gray, Judge, and Torres, 2-man against Cade Povich. I like that. The Yankees are another team that if you are not going the Miami-Cincinnati route, they are a team that's going to look pretty interesting. Povich struggles with his control. He has made a handful of major league starts, and he's got good stuff. If he's throwing strikes, he'll be fine. But it's a really dangerous matchup against the Yankees, and it's a team that can really do damage if he's not getting ahead in counts and if he's falling in the fastball counts. We just saw Oakland light him up because he couldn't get ahead in counts. If you do that against the Yankees, it's not going to go well. So even if you're not getting to full 5-man stacks, the idea of a 2-man like Torres, Judge, or something against Povich makes a lot of sense to me. Juan Yepez, 1-off against Peralta. Again, this is kind of just like a cheap leverage play against the popular pitcher. It makes sense. I get it. Obviously, I'd rather just be somebody else, but it's whatever. If I'm not playing Peralta, I may as well take a shot against him. Hunter Brown and Joe Ryan with a 3-man red stack, including De La Cruz. So you kind of get the point here that you can get some really, really high upside Toronto lineups because of who else you can get with them. Seattle against Tyler Anderson. Already talked about them a little bit, but I do like the spot. They get a nice park upgrade. You're getting to a good part of the Seattle lineup, getting a 2-man Cincinnati stack. I don't love Benson hitting 9th, but you could change that to probably like anybody else. De La Cruz, obviously, I like a lot. Rivera, 2K flat, hitting 6th in that park. He's not the best hitter, but he can do enough damage in that park. Not the ideal one-off, but good enough when you consider that it is getting me to Crochet. It's getting me Mania. If you wanted to upgrade Rivera to somebody else, you just move Crochet down to like Cole Reagans and you just picked up $1,800. So, again, just really, really easy to build a good team around Seattle. Here's a nice 5-3 with Miami, where we're getting two of the best pitchers on the board. Pricing is really just broken on bats today, where you can make just such good lineups that you kind of like all of it. You don't have to make any decisions like, oh, I need to sacrifice this pitcher to get to this offense or anything like that, because of how cheap that Cincinnati Miami game specifically is. But there's other spots that are cheap as well. Kansas City, I saw somebody ask about. I like them here. It's a nice park upgrade for them from a home run standpoint. Their home park in Kauffman Stadium is good for offense overall. Massive outfield, balls in play turn into hits, singles turn into doubles. They're able to take advantage of it with their speed, all of that. But it is a tough place to hit home runs. Fenway Park is not. They have an okay matchup. Criswell, I believe, is expected to start for Boston. I'm not sure if they've actually confirmed that, but he's done a decent job limiting power this year. And then it is sort of a bullpen game. Like, he generally doesn't go too deep into the game, but they do have a near 5 implied run total. They are hitting in Fenway Park, so the upside's really high. Salvador Perez's salary has come down a little bit from where it was, when it was north of 5K. He's obviously always one of the highest upside catchers. Bobby Witt at shortstop, always a high ceiling. I assume this team isn't getting too much ownership since nobody is either. Bobby Witt projected for 10% ownership is the high mark on this offense, 8% to Perez. All of that seems perfectly fine to me. And then again, you can just use Miami and you get Mania plus Reagans, two of the best projected pitchers. Kansas City, one of the highest upside offenses, stacked 2 through 6. So it's not like you're using a weak part of their order or anything like that. And then 1, 5, 6 from Miami, and you have a really, really good lineup. So again, it's just so easy to build lineups on the slate. KC Miami again, KC Pittsburgh. That's an interesting one where I would like it less if pricing were better today, if that makes sense. Because if pricing were sharper, then I think you could kind of it would be easier to differentiate lineups without sacrificing a lot in the way of projection. But because pricing is so soft and some of these teams look so good, and it's so easy to build lineups, you're going to overlap a lot. So the idea of, even though I obviously don't want to go against Garrett Crochet, the idea of saying okay, I'm going to play this relatively popular KC team. I'm going to play them with two of the most popular pitchers in Reagans and Peralta. I don't have Crochet in this lineup, so I may as well just try and capitalize on a game where Crochet doesn't pitch well, and you get 3, 4, 5 from the Pirates. You do also have a bad bullpen behind Crochet. There's ways they can get there. So again, it's not that I would want to allocate a lot of money to Pittsburgh against Crochet or Washington against Peralta or any of that, but I don't hate the idea of mini stacking with those lower probability teams a little bit, especially in a lineup like this where, while Kansas City isn't getting a ton of ownership, they are going to be one of the more popular teams, and they're paired with popular pitchers. You're going to get a lot of overlap with KC plus those pitchers. So kind of leveraging against one of the other popular pitchers, because the thing is, you can build this KC stack with Crochet also. It's not like it would be difficult to play Crochet for 500 more than Freddie Peralta. So at least by going to these Pittsburgh pieces, you're saying I understand that I'm going to have a lot of competition around this lineup. Let me at least knock some of them off by stacking against Crochet, or if you had Crochet, stacking against Peralta, as far as the mini stack goes. So a lot of times on 12-game slates, I really wouldn't like it. Today, I think it does make a little bit more sense. I think that's probably why it's showing up for me. Here we have a 5-man with 3 one-offs. Cal Raleigh, one of the best catching one-offs. Andrew Vaughn, I think, is a very good one-off today. Marco Gonzalez pitching for the Pirates. Park downgrade for Gonzalez, coming back off the injured list. He's a fly ball pitcher, doesn't miss a lot of bats. Very, very small margin for error for him because his stuff just isn't very good. And Vaughn is cheap. He has power. He should be able to put the ball in play here. I like him as a pretty inexpensive one-off. And then you're getting Mania and Ryan again. So I like all of those for one reason or another. What else did we have after KC? Milwaukee against Washington. Completely blanking on who's actually pitching for Washington. Not somebody that I'm playing. I know that. Jackson Rutledge, not projected to be a very good major league pitcher. Projects for a 16% strikeout percentage over the rest of the season. Getting to some Milwaukee certainly looks good here. Didn't have their lineup when I built these. I'm not sure if we've gotten it since, but we know that they're a team that has plenty of upside. They're in a good hitter's park. You can see again, the top of the order for Miami allows you to afford Christian Yelich as part of this stack, allows you to afford Bryce Turang as part of your stack. It allows you to get to Reagans and Ryan. So all that looks good. Motown, and I think somebody before him said is Carson Spears in play. I'm not getting to him because it's so easy to get to all of the good pitchers on the slate. The case that I would make for him is if you do believe that Miami is going to end up being like twice as popular as they're being projected right now, you do get negative correlation. Like you are taking a pitcher against one of the worst offenses in baseball that is popular. And there is some merit to that, but I still would be I'd be more interested if hitter pricing were sharper today. Like the problem you're going to run into is you play him, you play, whoever your favorite SP1 is, let's just say Garrett Crochet, because he's the most expensive for this example. You still, and let's say you stack like Kansas City or you stack Toronto or whoever it may be, you're still like directly competing with teams that have the same stack as you, but have Garrett Crochet plus Cole Reagans or Garrett Crochet and Joe Ryan or Joe Ryan and Cole Reagans, whatever it is. So you're not really, outside of the negative correlation with Miami, you're not really gaining anything by going to a value pitcher like Spears today that doesn't have the same sort of strikeout upside as so many pitchers on this slate. That is my concern. It's not that I don't think he can have a good enough start against Miami to like justify his salary. The problem is just you have a handful of legitimate aces on this slate, and you can basically stack any team that you want and play two of those aces. So you kind of like are putting yourself in a tough spot where you need like all of these aces to fail or most of them to fail and Carson Spears to have like the best game he'll ever have. Obviously, you're kind of walking a fine line there. I think there's just easier ways to win tournaments. St. Louis lefties against Hendricks, yeah, they look good. I don't think I'm getting to them, but it is a good spot. The park isn't ideal in Busch Stadium, but Hendricks isn't very good. He does struggle with left-handed power. If you maybe, like St. Louis is a team that I wouldn't be surprised if I see them pop up a little bit once I adjust ownership on Miami, because they do give you some power. They are pretty inexpensive. The lefties in particular. I'm not really getting to them right now, but trying to get the actual lineup here. I'm not really getting to him right now, but like Nolan Gorman, he's batting eighth, but 3,900 against the pitcher that doesn't get swings and misses. He has a lot of power. Brendan Donovan, Alec Burleson, Lars Nootbaar, all from the left side, all affordably priced. They're all in like Donovan, Burleson, and Nootbaar are all outfielders in that Jazz Chisholm range. Salary goes. Jazz obviously projects better. He's a really good player. He has no business being 4,200, but it is still baseball. Like he can hit 4 line drives, go 0 for 4, and these guys beat him. So if you think, okay, Jazz actually ends up coming in at like 20% and these guys are 5, then they become more appealing. The problem, and the reason I'm getting to Jazz specifically in Miami so much, goes back to what I was saying before. If Jazz is projected as like 9 or 10% owned and these guys are projected at like 6, I'm going to just play Jazz Chisholm over Brendan Donovan and Lars Nootbaar because he's Jazz Chisholm. So that's the issue that I ran into with this build and why I think these ownership projections end up increasing on Miami, because I think everybody's going to have the same idea that I do. So that is a team where if that ownership increases, they do become guys that you can kind of like fill in. If you sort of think about it as like the lineups I have right now are a starting point where I have all this Miami, and then I increase ownership on Miami, and as a result, Miami lineups start like falling off, and I need to like backfill with other relatively high upside guys in the 3,500 to 4K range. I think you kind of start seeing some of these Cardinals lefties potentially like being the guys that backfill that. Also, like Alex Bregman at 4,300, certainly somebody I could get more of if Miami falls off for me. The 4K Houston guys in general, Pena, Diaz, another team that I probably start to get more of as I start to lose some Miami. As far as guys that I'm not getting to, which there should be some with the way that I'm playing Miami at the moment. Not getting to, Volpe, 10% owned, fine. Not really getting to Carroll, Soto, Torres, So it looks like the Yankees, a team that are getting some ownership right now that I'm not getting to. I said it before. I think they're perfectly fine here against Povich. It's a really high upside spot. Obviously, a pitcher that has trouble throwing strikes. Like I said, he's inexperienced, and the Yankees have a ton of power. The downside is they are in Camden Yards, so right-handed power doesn't play up there. It's a tough park to hit home runs to left field. Aaron Judge, obviously, fully capable of doing it, but you do run the risk of either getting some doubles that would be home runs everywhere else or getting some flyouts that would be home runs everywhere else. So that's not ideal. And again, it just comes back to if this team is going to be the same ownership as Miami, and Miami is cheaper and allows me to get better upside around them, I'm going to just go to Miami, especially because I can just like go to Miami plus Aaron Judge and still get the best piece from the Yankees and then just move on, to other stuff. So not really surprised right now that I'm not getting to the Yankees. Corbin Carroll, 4,700 looks okay. The Mets, Alvarez, Nimmo, two guys getting like 8-9% ownership that I don't have in these lineups. Nimmo's gotten more expensive because he has been playing really, really well. It is a pretty good spot for the Mets. Tanner Gordon has one major league appearance. The Mets do have a pretty high implied run total here. The thing that I don't like, and again, I would like it. I wouldn't be worried about this if they were like 4 or 5% owned, but this park is tough for hitting home runs. And then you have Cincinnati, you have Milwaukee, you have Boston, and as you have Angel Stadium, as stadiums that are much easier for hitting home runs, and the hitters in those games are in good matchups, and they're the same ownership, and in a lot of cases cheaper. So it just comes back to if my opponents are going to play the Mets at the same rate as the Mariners and the Marlins and the Reds and the Royals, I'd rather be playing those teams because they have more home run upside. There is a pretty good chance that my opponents don't actually play them at the same rate, and maybe the Mets do end up getting a little bit less ownership than those other teams, in which case I would be more interested. People are saying that Crochet will be on a short leash on Twitter. Haven't seen the quote. If anybody has who sent it, that would help. Trying to search it now because coach speak can a lot of times mean absolutely nothing. But if they specifically said he's limited, then obviously I would I believe that. Sox manager said Garrett Crochet will be on innings and the pitch count tonight. Out of the break, he will be the fifth starter used. This will give him at least 10 days off. He said it will be a shorter start for Garrett Crochet tonight with Jonathan Cannon likely behind him out of the bullpen. All right, I do believe that. I think it crosses Crochet out. If he had said something like, we're going to monitor his pitch count or something, I don't know if I would have bought into it. The fact he specifically said which starting pitcher is going to back him up makes me very comfortable in just not playing Garrett Crochet today. So, back to the drawing board on that one. Fortunately, we do have a lot of other very good pitchers on this slate. It does make the Pirates a little bit sneakier. I don't really know how actionable that is on a 12-game slate because it is still the Pirates. But if, let's say Crochet is going 2-3 innings and then you're getting Jonathan Cannon behind him, the Pirates are almost definitely going to be lower owned than they would if they were facing Jonathan Cannon out of the gate. So I don't know, maybe a little bit of interest there. Certainly makes me think that one team I showed before that had the 3-man Pirate stack is even better than it was before. I kind of doubt that you should be getting a lot of Pirates, but it obviously does make them better if you're getting Jonathan Cannon as basically a bulk reliever behind Crochet. So yeah, his ownership, I assume, kind of just gets spread out to this other group. Like I said at the top, I don't think there's anything sneaky that I have showing right now. I think this is collectively the group of pitchers that everybody would agree is the best group of pitchers on the slate. So I assume you just get his 34% ownership spread out with Sonny Gray, coming up from 17% to 22, and Reagans maybe gets to 35, and Peralta gets to 30, and Minaya gets to 32. Joe Ryan gets to 25. I assume you just get something like that. Maybe Hunter Brown gets a little bit more, but I would expect it would be weird if it goes to any one guy specifically. So yeah, I assume it kind of just gets spread out amongst those guys. I'll go through position by position, and if anybody has any questions, get those in. Cal Raleigh, Tyler Stevenson, Mitch Garver, Salvador Perez, Danny Jansen. I'll be perfectly happy if those are my 5 highest owned catchers. I like all 5 of those guys quite a bit. Good matchups for all of them. Good hitters parks for 4 of them. Jansen doesn't have one, but I like that Toronto stack a bit. First base, I assume is going to be a lot of Josh Bell, Ty France, Vlad Guerrero, Rhys Hoskins, Candelario, Steer. I think Candelario is showing up more for me at third base. I think Steer is showing up more in the outfield. So yeah, really happy with this. I don't know. Maybe I don't dislike. I thought at the beginning of the show that I really disliked my hitter exposures. I really don't. I like them a lot. I just think that they were created with bad assumptions, and so they're going to end up coming down. I do like that, behind Miami, I'm still getting to the guys that I would want to get to. Jonathan India, Polanco, I like. Vidal Brujan, it's a function of getting to Miami stacks and him being projected for no ownership. That's probably something else that is driving up Miami overall. Like he positively correlates with all of these guys, and then a sim is basically saying, "Oh, he's 2% owned, so now you're different." Also, he'll probably be a little bit higher owned. That'll pull him back a little bit. But I do like India. I do like Polanco. If you are stacking Miami, second base shortstop for Brujan is fine. Brandon Drury, he's cheap and gives you some upside. There is some volatility in his matchup too. Brian Wu has given up no power to right-handed hitters this year. If you're looking to attack him, I would much rather be doing it with lefties. But he is coming back from the injured list. There is, some percent chance of, he pitches really, really poorly. But in that case, I feel like I would just rather have a full Angel stack. So I don't really love Drury too much. I wonder if he's a one-off or, it looks like a one-off there. 2-man with Ohapi, full Angel stack, 2-man with Moniak. He's cheap enough if he's at the top of the order. I don't hate it, but I would need a really, really strong lineup around him to want to do it. Bryce Turang, if you can get there, looks good. Michael Massey looks good at 4,100. Third base, we should be getting a lot of Candelario, I would think. Yeah, Candelario, Marte, Rivera. Again, a 2K player batting 6th in Cincinnati is going to look pretty good. Also, I like that he's getting the start against a right-handed pitcher. It's not like he's starting against a lefty and he has a ton of pinch hit risk behind him, so I like that. Monasterio and Ernie Clement kind of just punts that are probably mostly used in Milwaukee and Toronto stacks eventually, or respectively, rather. Shortstop, getting to Ellie De La Cruz, absolutely love that. I do think that, even if his ownership's a little bit higher than 7%, it's probably not crazy. You have Bobby Witt in a good spot in that price range. You do have pitching you want to pay for. You have value at shortstop. So I do think he's probably relatively low owned, and I like getting there a lot. Xavier Edwards, clearly a good value play. You could make the case that, maybe he's going over owned in tournaments. And if you're stacking Miami, you could play Brujan over him and be different that way. That's a way to be contrarian within Miami, even if you do think they're going to be popular. But clearly one of the top values. If you're playing cash, I assume he's your cash shortstop. Bobby Witt Jr., obviously love getting there. JP Crawford looks fine. Lefty. But if Crawford is in the lineup, I wouldn't worry about it too much. Tyler Anderson is basically built to get right-handed hitters out. He doesn't really have a good way to get lefties out. Gives up more power to lefties. Lindor looks perfectly fine. He's one of the Mets I am actually getting to. And then in the outfield, Spencer Steer is actually not as high as I thought. Josh Chisholm, clearly the guy I'm getting to a ton. Brian De La Cruz, Jesus Sanchez. So the outfielders on Miami, just very, 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 very obvious values. Rhys Hines gives you some upside. I like Julio Rodriguez. I love the park bump for him. He's been pretty unlucky overall this year. He hits an extremely pitcher-friendly park, so he loses production. Happy to get there. Hunter Renfroe starting against, as far as I know, a righty. Somebody correct me if they changed that from Criswell earlier, but he's another one that sometimes has, Criswell's still listed. He's another one that sometimes has pinch hit risk, but he's getting the start against the righty. Melendez is in the starting lineup, so that's somebody that would normally pinch hit for him. So there is less pinch hit risk for Renfroe today than usual. I like that quite a bit. I like him a lot in this park. Mitch Haniger does have pinch hit risk, but he looks pretty good. So overall, I like the plays I'm getting to. I just, ideally, I think what's going to happen, or not even ideally, but I think what's going to happen when I adjust Marlins projected ownership is these Miami numbers remain high, but they just get pushed down a little bit. And then the numbers on those third, fourth, fifth guys that I was getting to that I like just get pushed up a little bit. So I think that's mostly what's going to happen. I think this probably was pretty reflective in general of how I'm going to end up playing the slate, just with way more exposure to Miami than I actually end up with. Top 3 stacks in a vacuum. I mean, for me, I guess it's Miami, Cincinnati, and Seattle. I don't think looking at this, I can really say anything else. You could, I guess, include Toronto, KC in there, like instead of Seattle or something. But I have a hard time saying it's not really those three, just given how much it looks like I'm getting to them. Who are people saying is also on a pitch count? TDID Forever said, as a hand builder, changing my crochet sucks. Oh, well, back to the drawing board. Ryan or Peralta here. Either one. I think I prefer Peralta. Projections are pretty close on the two. I'll double check. But my brain prefers Ryan. I don't remember if I said Ryan or Peralta, but my brain prefers Ryan. Projection is basically the same, slightly higher on Peralta. I just like the park for Ryan. San Francisco strikes out a little bit more than Washington does. Peralta's a better strikeout pitcher than Ryan, though. So like they are very, very, very similar. I don't think you're going wrong with either one. I slightly lean toward Joe Ryan in my head. Do I like the Braves or Boston in the spot? I don't like Boston really. Cole Reagans is extremely good. The case for Boston would be that Reagans is popular and it is Fenway Park. Of the pitchers that are getting ownership, I think, and I'm excluding Garrett Crochet now, obviously. I think that Boston is the team I would want to stack first. It would be between them and Colorado because obviously Sean Manaea is the least talented pitcher in this highlighted group, but they are still Colorado and they suck and they're in Citi Field. Boston does get the hit in a really hitter-friendly park. So you do get negative correlation with Reagans. You do get an offense that has a very high ceiling if things go their way. I don't think I'm going to end up getting to them on this slate, and I wouldn't say that I like them. But if you told me I had to stack against a pitcher that's getting 15+% ownership today, I think I would go Boston because of the park and their talent. I think that's all the questions. Top three stacks. So yeah, Brian Wu is on a pitch count. Any Twins interest? I have a really hard time with that one. Just the park is so difficult for hitting home runs. Harrison isn't good, but it's not like he's horrible. Late slate, I think they look fine. Like on the late slate, I assume that you're going to get most of the ownership going to like some combination of Seattle, Toronto, Arizona, Atlanta, and probably leaving off the Twins. So I think they'd be easier to get to there. Ryan Stubbs said any O's. To me, the O's are kind of just in that spot that the O's are always in, where they're one of the best offenses in baseball, and you're not wrong for playing them at low ownership. But I also am having trouble getting to them. They are expensive. They're one of the few teams that'll probably cost you some of that good pitching. I don't really have cheap pitching that I like. So I think they're pretty tough to get to. Brewers and single entry is fine. Again, they wouldn't be my single entry team, but they're in a good park. They're facing a bad pitcher. They have talent. They have upside. You can build Brewer stacks with good pitching pretty easily using some of the value elsewhere. So they wouldn't be my team, but they're certainly on the list of, if they were to win a single entry tournament, I wouldn't be looking at it like, wow, how the hell did that person get on the Brewers? Yeah, so I think that's it. Unless top FanDuel pitcher, I have no idea. You subscribe to my Dub Club though, so you'll have that in like 30 minutes. But yeah, off the top of my head, I don't know. Haven't run that stuff yet, but it will be posted. Yeah, so that's it. Thanks for checking out the show. Again, check out Endgame Syndicate if you haven't already. Links in the description below. Good luck on your lineups tonight. Hopefully the Miami-Cincy game goes well. And I will see you back here on Monday. Hope you all have a good rest of your week.